Welcome to the Reimagine podcast. Each week, give yourself 30 minutes and meet the people working hard to create the future of insurance today.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler with a special episode of both the Reimagine podcast and That Annuity Show. We recently held a forum in 5 parts focused on reimagining retirement in a post-COVID world. Today, we're sharing the conversation from forum number 5, the last one, creating online security for seniors and their savings. Laura, tell us about the people that we will hear from right after this.
Sure. So we had Edward Chang, Assistant United States Attorney, on the panel, Paul Mackay from Nassau Financial Group, Paresh with Google, Timothy Zeilman, Head of Cyber at Hartford Steam Boiler, and our moderator for the forum was Ken Goldstein from the University of Hartford.
So Ramsey, we had a bit of a debate just before this. People versus machine. Who wins?
I think machines win in the long run. So I think that we need to go forth with this attitude that cybersecurity will require technical solutions. In the short term, education, being smart about how you interact in the cyber world and share your information, all that is valuable in making yourself a smaller target. But it's very clear that if you have on one side individuals or even companies competing against everything from nation states with a lot of computing power and large fleets of people, or just independent hackers, you've got people that are focusing full time on one side versus other folks that are and are very well armed with knowledge and computing power. Versus on the other side, you've got normal folks like us. I think that technology needs to not just prevent, but also actually focus on being able to remediate once things have happened. So that's my view. And that was a tension that came out in the conversation. Is it education? Is it technology? I think it's both, but I think in the long run, it's technology.
Okay, Laura, we're talking about seniors, be careful of that definition here. Where do you fall in that?
I think it's going to be a combination of both. Paresh had made a comment that we need to limit our blast radius. So it's not if it will happen, it's that it can happen. And when it does happen, we need to limit what that spread is and what it looks like. And for me, I think it's a combination of the education component plus the technology. There was part of the conversation where it was focused on educating children. So I know that the series was on the retirement aged individual, but really the conversation was about if we start educating children at a younger age, hopefully they'll grow up with knowledge that will help arm them as they go through their technological journey. So it's interesting. I know there's many sides to it, but for me, it's humans plus machines.
Yeah, I thought we had a really interesting discussion and a lot of layers to it, right, Ramsey? Law enforcement, they're overwhelmed, right? And if we even heard a personal story, if you lose your personal identity gets stolen, even if you know people and have connections with people in various, with different legal authorities, it still is a mess. It's not an easy situation to work your way out of. We heard from insurance companies, this is a difficult one to price for. Imagine if you were a company on the end of one of the solar wind hack we're just reading about right now. It's exceptionally complicated, but this is one where I just don't think no one's safe. I think, in my opinion, it's a question of, do you have people who are sophisticated enough to make sure they've got the software, the computer updated, they've taken reasonable steps to make sure people are able to respond. And Ramsey, I don't know, what sort of nuances do you see from a retirement standpoint? We're talking seniors, we're talking large sums of money, people who are in some sense, you could argue they're sets of seniors who really are kids. It's the first time they've been on Zoom. Their kids are, in fact, are teaching them how to use this stuff.
Yeah. So I had one observation is as panelists talked about the education part of it, the checklist of things you had to do was getting longer and longer and longer and longer. And I thought that's hard for somebody at any age. And it's obviously harder and harder as somebody gets older and they may have cognitive issues to sort of keep up with all those things. And then you bring up an interesting point, this idea that like maybe kids are teaching. What's interesting is I don't think kids care about a lot of those privacy issues. So learning, you may end up be learning from kids that don't have the same sets of parameters, privacy parameters built into their mindset that the older folks do. So I just don't think this is a complicated issue, no matter how you stack it up. But as I said earlier, I think the long run solution is going to be one that's based on technology, because if we all do it individually, everybody's going to handle it different ways, and there's going to be a lot of inconsistency.
Well, yeah, and it's just going to become more and more important as more seniors start to access their retirement accounts online, start to buy products, start to manage their products. It's one we've got to tackle as an industry, because at the end of the day, we want people to feel safe,
Sure.
safe to do business with us.
Yeah.
All right, Laura, you ready for, should we head to the discussion?
Yeah, let's roll tape.
Excellent. All right. And here we go. This is actually forum number 5 of 5. So thank you. A couple of you on here have been with us throughout, and thank you for doing this, and thank you for coming. And just to give some of you context about who we are and why we do this. One is I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Nassau Financial Group. We've got a couple of our senior execs here. Tom Buckingham, who runs product and service. I work for him, by the way, so tell him be nice. Yeah, Paul Mackay, who's going to be on our panel, Chief Technology Officer, and we're a 5-year-old company. We focus on really do a lot of great products that important for a lot of seniors. So annuities, whole variety of them. We just got into Medicare supplements. So issues associated with seniors are ones that are very interesting to us as a company. On the innovation side, about 2 years ago, we actually, I launched, with our team, an incubator in our building, which is sort of ground zero of innovation or of the insurance community in Hartford. We've all been sort of active in the, working with startups over the, since 2016 when we bought Phoenix. But we kind of, sort of stepped up to the plate and said, what are some of the gaps in the ecosystem that we could fill? And if you went from, 2016, not much was going on. We worked to help get Startup Bootcamp funded. That was one of the first, I guess, Ken, that was sort of the second, I would call Reset probably the first incubator. I bet there were some more before, accelerators. Fast forward to 2019, we had Techstars across the street from us doing an accelerator for Stanley. Upward Hartford has an age tech and has a smart building lab. We've got an amazing makerspace going. Hartford Health sponsored a digital health innovator. The gap we saw that we could fill was we were attracting a lot of really interesting companies from around the world to come to Hartford. But 3 months, like even if you were Google, Jennifer, and it takes a long time to get a contract with an insurance company, let alone if you're a startup. So great to pull these people in. How do we keep the energy? How do we keep it in Hartford? And so we opened our doors, sort of created a WeWorks type of space where startups could come in, and our rule was, you doing something really interesting, are you really good, innovative, interesting person who we want to hang around with, and are you working on some problems that would be useful and valued by the community? It turned out the space was valuable. I think, Craig Sims, you're one of the people we got in here. I think the space was valuable for like people like you doing startups in Hartford, but we found that a lot of these startups were actually living in this virtual world a long time before we all were. And the forums that we created, we created a number of sort of small forums where we would bring startups together with some of the incumbent, line officer managers together, talking about the general problems, tried to take this out of a pitch event and more of a how do we build relationships and get, startups to listen to companies and get the companies to, roll the windshield down a little bit, and talk to people who are wanting to get on the inside of the car. Really successful. We, February, we had a huge investor event. This was one of sort of the last legs of the ecosystem we're trying to pull together. Laura, we had, how many one-on-ones did you set up with startups and VCs that one day in February?
Yeah, it was over 100 individual meetings.
I think it was 150. That's Tom Buckingham. That's the performance review. So
150, Tom. Did you catch that?
Yeah. So, of course, like everybody, March hits. Oh my gosh, what do we do? How do we pivot? And we said, well, how do we take this and keep the Hartford ecosystem alive? But then what could we do that we couldn't have done had we just sort of confined ourselves to Hartford? One was focus more on areas that were relevant directly to our company, which was retirement. And yes, there are some companies in the Hartford area that are focused on retirement, but if you really look and say who's doing this, it's scattered across the country. There's not really an epicenter of this. And so that was kind of the genesis of what we've done with the series. And my unstated goal here is to say, could we identify and kind of create a community of like 100 people who will really, reshape the business over the next 2 years. So we've had some great discussions going up till now. Laura will tell you a little bit about later what we're doing. We're recording this. We're turning them to podcasts. We're writing position papers for like up to number 3. So we'll catch up, Ken, on this one. You can help us get some of your grad students to help us with this one, really kind of map out what does the future look like. If you're an investor, what do you invest in? If you're a startup, what kind of problems are you going to solve? If you're and along the way, we've had some interesting challenges internally with people on the panel, which is what does senior mean? The definition of a senior is, wait a second, I'm kind of sort of senior. I hit that age. I don't think I'm old. My fonts are still okay. I can, they're not small. What does that mean? And what is yesterday we had a discussion. What does a product mean? Is it another annuity, another 401k, or is it really a product, service, or is it a conversation? So hoping to have that same discussion today around security. So thanks all of you for doing this. And with that, Laura, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thanks so much. And as Paul mentioned, this is Forum 5 of 5. And when we were discussing what this one was going to look like, it was based off of simple questions such as how can we help seniors become more digitally savvy? How can they protect themselves from cyber criminals? But really, as the conversation has evolved over the last 4 forums, it's become so much more. So as Paul had mentioned, it's been a progression for us. We've reimagined retirement in multiple ways, discussed the importance of wellness as more than just finances, and then how to effectively and meaningfully engage with digital tools. We've been virtual, or we will be virtual. I'm sure we'll go hybrid. So what does that look like, and how do we do it well? We talked about D2C strategies. Craig, thank you for that conversation yesterday. We've dreamt of new products and opportunities and weighed in what does senior actually mean? So I'm eager to see what today's conversation brings to the table. You are all an active part of that conversation, and you're here. You've been invited for your viewpoints, your expertise, and your experience. So we want to hear from you. The next part of our journey today together will be curated networking. So in your networking rooms, you'll find that you will know some people and you will not know some of those people, and that is with intention. So please take the time within the 10-minute window, introduce yourselves briefly, but then let's talk about a question to warm ourselves up for later on today. So the question that I ask that you all consider is internet security. What does that mean for seniors?
My pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Ken Goldstein, clinical instructor of risk management and insurance at the University of Hartford, and today's moderator for the panel discussion. So Ken, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Laura. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to meet you virtually. We appreciate you taking the time. Today's focus obviously is on security from a senior perspective. Paul alluded to how we're defining senior. We're going to go with the AARP's definition of senior, which has senior at 50 and above. In connection with that, you might ask yourself, why are we focused on seniors beyond what you heard in the intro from Paul? There's a distinct rise in data breach activity with regard to seniors as well. So those things brought together make for a good panel. I'm going to start out by introducing the panelists for today. We've got a diverse group. Start with Eddie Chang, who's an assistant U.S. attorney. Eddie's background is in cybercrime cases, also has a cybersecurity insurance background, so the two of those areas are complementary in nature. Welcome, Eddie. In addition, Paul Mackay is joining us from Nassau Financial Group. He is a chief technology officer and vice president, has expertise in insurance and reinsurance, not only in North America, but across the pond into the UK as well. Welcome, Paul. Joining Eddie and Paul are Paresh, Nana, and Tim Zeilman. Paresh is with Google, and he's a cloud architect focusing on secure infrastructure and services. And there's a tie-in not only to insurance, but reinsurance as well, also focused on the North American area. And lastly, Tim is the head of Hartford Steamboiler's cybersecurity practice, responsible for its network security and privacy solutions, both on the insurance side as well as loss control and mitigation. So welcome to Paresh and Tim as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Absolutely. Okay, so we set the table with regard to what we're thinking about in connection with seniors being 50 and up. You'd be surprised that if you went to some of the more recent AARP surveys, a couple themes stick out. Number one, a lot of technology usage with regard to folks in the 50 and up age bracket. And in addition, if you fast forward 10 years, there's going to be upwards of over $84 billion being spent in technology products by folks that are in the 50 and up age group. So with that being said, what we want to do today is cover some different themes. We're going to talk first about technology engagement and kind of the rationale for why things are being used. Tim, I'd like to kick off with you. Maybe perhaps give us a sense of what you see being used from an engagement perspective and really the reason that use is up as well.
Yeah, it's a great question to start with. And really the reality is that we don't see that much difference in the usage of technology by seniors compared to the usage of technology by other demographic groups. Seniors use technology in the same way and for most of the same purposes that we see in other demographic groups, with some slight differences. For example, while lots and lots of seniors obviously have smartphones, they tend to be, as a group, a bit more reliant on their laptops and desktops than other demographic groups. So we see some differences like that. They use technology and the internet for things like surfing, shopping, banking, personal finance, the sorts of things that we all use the internet for and our devices for. Just like everybody else, they use technology to keep in touch with friends and family. Texting, email, social media usage are among the top usages. I think one important thing to remember too is that seniors are a very diverse group. You have very technologically savvy seniors, and then you have seniors that aren't quite as technologically savvy. Both of my parents are in their early 80s, but they were computer programmers in the 60s. So I've gone to them for tech advice throughout my entire life. They may not be typical, but there are people like that out there that kind of buck some of the stereotypes that you think about with seniors and technology usage. We've seen too during the pandemic, as you might expect, seniors have increased their usage of technology, as many of us have. Things like learning how to use Zoom, or social clubs, online fitness classes, online dating, things like that. As you might expect, we've seen a big uptick in the use of telehealth, telemedicine services with seniors over the course of the pandemic. So pushing as people are locked down and perhaps have less in-person interaction, push to increase their usage of technology, both in terms of volume and for different purposes they might have used it for beforehand. I think the big thing with seniors is that they, I think for the most part, have a different degree of confidence, perhaps less confidence in using technology and going online. Many of us became forced to use technology and very familiar with it in the course of our jobs. People who left the workforce a little bit earlier often didn't have that experience. I think that's a big contributor as well. But at the end of the day, they're doing what we all do. They're using technology to get what they need and what they want in terms of kind of basic things they need for their existence, but also to socialize and do the things they enjoy.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Paresh, Tim just brought up the concepts of banking and personal finance in particular. What are you seeing with regard to financial management in connection with planning, perhaps retirement and so forth on your end as well?
Yeah, no, great question. Thank you very much, Ken. A lot of what we're seeing with our customers is seniors are starting to use technology more and more for some of the non-traditional things. Like Tim had mentioned, the traditional things are, online banking, online dating as an example. But with the COVID pandemic, we're starting to see seniors getting concerned about things like, hey, I'm not able to go into my physician's office. How can I meet with my physician to do things, right? And that healthcare scenario is also extending into financial management. So being able to meet regularly with my financial planner, I may have traditionally had a annual or biannual meeting around my retirement accounts or changes to my portfolio. A lot of those seniors relied on those two touch points during the year to meet face to face with their planners or brokers. And they now are forced to do that online, virtually via things like Zoom or co-sharing, where the broker is actually coming online on a Zoom call or meeting, but also sharing documentation and collateral, things like slides and charts virtually with seniors. So we're certainly seeing a lot of uptick in online presence around, some of the more non-traditional things like meeting with financial planners. The other side on the, as we focus on the insurance market, we're also seeing that a lot of traditional insurance related processes, being able to submit a claim, getting underwritten for a new policy, for example, that's also becoming virtualized. And seniors are starting to embrace more and more of that. My mom and dad live in Connecticut. They recently downsized their home. And the example I'd give is, their new insurance provider wanted to go through an underwriting process, and they typically would have sent out a underwriter to the home to look at, the structure and all the other stuff that goes with doing the underwriting for that policy. It was all done electronically, meaning, my mom and dad were expected to download an application onto a mobile phone, step through every room in the house and take very specific pictures of specific things per what the underwriter required, and then submit that electronically. And what that does is, it helps in this 9-10 month pandemic that we are in. And I got a feeling that over time, this is going to be the new normal. That underwriting process for my mom and dad went very, very smoothly. It went very quickly, and it didn't necessitate them needing anybody coming into their home or being available at specific times. So, we're certainly seeing that for insurance related processes, underwriting claims, that the technology is starting to catch up with what the process requires, and more seniors are adopting it. And that extends to also, just traditional things like policy management, being able to access documents around my policy, being able to pay a premium or submit a claim, right? So that's what we're seeing in the general market around how seniors are embracing technology for financial planning and retirement and insurance. Ken?
Fantastic. So what I want to do is I want to shift themes then. Those are some good ideas to open up with regard to technology and the reasoning. And you teased out things from the perspective of COVID and shift to online, different platforms, the ability to kind of upload things, maybe e-signature as an example. Let's move on to another theme, which is really kind of front and center with regard to data breaches specifically. If I look online at Tim's company site, HSB, the moniker is if you collect, if you store, if you transmit, if you share some type of personally identifiable information, financially included, then you're effectively taking on the same type of cybersecurity exposures as a business would be. And if you layer over that the fact that you've got home Wi-Fi, you have internet connected devices that are being used in a significant type of way, that amps up what you're looking at in connection with exposure. So Eddie, perhaps this is a good time to bring you in. You're managing cybercrime cases. What are you seeing with regard to trends, and to the extent that you can kind of comment on the senior aspect of the trends as to cybersecurity, that would be helpful too.
Sure. I think we can probably all guess that the biggest area of overlap with respect to cybersecurity and cybercrime for seniors is the fact that they're very often victims when computer hackers get access to their retirement accounts or even just their regular bank accounts. So that's been going on for a long time. There's not a lot new there. and it's continuing to be a problem. And I don't think it's strictly a problem for seniors. We just see individuals being victimized by this type of account breakout crime on a pretty regular basis, and it can be significant. Obviously, if somebody has a large number of assets that can be accessed to these bank accounts. One area that I did kind of want to bring up today, which is a little bit off that traditional kind of computer attack, is that more and more we're seeing individual victims being used as part of criminal activity. So in other words, they're being used as what we call money mules. So, if cyber criminals have managed to get into one person's account, they might transfer the money to an unsuspecting individual who thinks they're engaging in a legitimate transaction. So, for example, you're selling something on eBay or whatever, and the purported buyer sends you a large check, much larger than that item is worth, and it's drawn on some corporation, and so the senior or the individual deposits that check and pays the extra amount back to the fraudster or to the at the direction of the fraudster. Well, the real difficult thing for the victim in this case is that having deposited the fraudulent check, they're often on the hook when that money gets taken back, and they're the ones who are kind of the innocent victim because they haven't done anything to hide themselves, of course. So it's easy to get that money back, whereas they're not able to get the money that they've forwarded on to somebody else. So that is a type of crime that we're seeing increasingly more often. That's a little bit of a twist on the traditional account breakout crimes.
Yeah, great example, unique example. I appreciate you sharing that. Paul, let's talk a little bit about some more traditional type of trends. Maybe we could start a little bit with phishing. What are you seeing in connection with the background on phishing for the folks that are here today?
Yeah, I think phishing has been around for a while, as we all know. But we're now seeing different kind of flavors of phishing, from the traditional email that we all know and love, so to say. But they're very common. But now we're getting into SMS type phishing, where text messaging is being used. The phony text messages, even nowadays, they're finding the last four of the social credit card details. They have the links to the payload site, etc. But again, targeting the this generation is more of the phishing, which is the voice phishing. Fraudsters now are, hi, I'm from Comcast. We've noticed in our monitoring that you've got a problem with your network and your computer. You've got a virus. Can we please log in? And people are giving away their user ID and passwords. That's like just saying, hey, welcome in. Here's everything, and away they go. But someone that I think a couple of you have mentioned today, the social side as well. So everything from the use of Facebook and Instagram, which may not be used as much by that generation, but the Lonely Hearts apps, that's become a very popular approach. People down in Florida are, from the statistics I've seen, that's a hot spot for this, where folks are setting up fake IDs, posing as friends and family members, and spamming people that way. So I think there's a lot of different angles now. It's not just the email that we all know and love.
Absolutely diverse ways to get folks to compromise their information. Relatedly, thinking about financial identity theft, how about the concept of spyware and logging of keystrokes and things like that?
I think spyware, the traditional spyware is the viruses that we've had for many, many years. Thankfully, the security companies have become very good at that. And Norton, Semantics, all of those have helped protect us. But today, we're into the adware and, as you say, key tracking. And they may not be just used for direct access to your computer. They can be used to, what the hackers would do is then horizontally move within your system or network. And, you get into very complex systems called rootkits. that these hackers will deploy into a network and exploit the vulnerabilities of a device or something else on your home network, or heaven forbid if you're sitting in Starbucks having a nice relaxing cup of tea or coffee, and there's a quiet guy sitting in the corner watching and seeing everything you do. And that's becoming a big vulnerability too. And, we can then touch on things like, the IoT devices. We've all heard the horror stories around, the Ring doorbells. Again, not direct malware as such, but exploiting those vulnerabilities of those devices. So yeah, a lot of issues still out there, Ken, but folks, the undesirables are still using.
They are indeed. Eddie, Paul just kind of segued well to where I wanted to go next, which was IoT, Internet of Things, or Internet connected technology. Any themes that you're seeing there, things being pumped out, perhaps fast and furious, and security is maybe an oversight?
We haven't really seen Internet of Things affecting at the individual level. Like we haven't seen the cases where somebody gets into your home network through your Nest device or whatever, or your Ring doorbell. But Internet of Things devices are definitely having an impact on computer security in general, because criminals are using them as a launching point for other attacks, right? So, all those cameras that are out there, for surveillance purposes are not locked down very well. And so once they get infected, then criminals are able to use those to route their network traffic through a compromised camera and evade detection that way. But it's certainly going to be just a matter of time before we start to see them leverage these devices and actually try to use them to make money as opposed to just being a tool.
Absolutely. That kind of goes back to where Tim had started when he made reference to laptops and desktops. You don't necessarily need to be just worried about your laptop and desktop. You have to be worried about the thermostat. You have to be worried about your fridge. You have to be worried about the different technology that could act as a vector to effectively attack in the future. Great points. Okay, so we started out with kind of technology and purpose behind it. You heard a little bit from the folks about data breach trends involving consumers generally, a little bit layered over to include seniors. Let's flip it around. Let's talk a little bit about loss prevention and mitigation. And Paul, I want to come back to you and kind of play out a little bit of some stuff around phishing and logging of keystrokes, but more from the lens of how do you prevent the possibility of an attack happening? If it happens to you, what can you do to mitigate your circumstances there? Why don't we start with phishing? What would be a couple of easy to understand things for a senior to be focused on in order to avoid compromising his or her personal information?
I mean, there's lots of different ways here, but checking the sender, any sender name and domain on an email, easier said than done, though, to be honest. Without giving away any details, I mean, most companies today do phishing and knowledge transfer training to their staff. Many companies do not get to the number where they need. I mean, the average is something like 11 to 15% of employees fail these tests. That's quite worrying when they've been educated. I think one of the biggest problems we have with this age group is that there is a woeful lack of knowledge and understanding and training for them. They're really buying the most complicated device they've ever purchased and thinking that, Windows is nice and easy to use, or Apple or iOS. But they're not really trained on it at all, and they are just exploited. So when we look at emails, but how do you teach an 80-year-old mother-in-law to, mum, you need to hover over the email address and make sure there's no spelling and that the domain name is right. And she looks at me and says, well, what are you on about? I mean, she doesn't know what these terms are or what she needs to do. But, all we can do is educate and help people. Another area is really around the sentiment in the content of the email or the message that you're receiving. Is it the normal style? I mean, if Tom was writing to me and, it had a different tone to it, I'd probably pick up on that. But again, if it's coming from your bank and there's bad grammar or there's spelling mistakes, be aware of those and kind of put a red flag up. The sign off, I mean, my boss, Costas, I mean, if he ever signed an email off saying Costas, I'd go, why is he doing that? He's always Gus. And, there's little things like that, but that's only because I know him and I've had that relationship. But, today these, the phishing attacks have become, it's called spear phishing when they go after a specific person. And in that email or that message, they will be referencing co-workers by name or even by rank and role within the company. So again, be very aware of those kind of things. SMSs, these, if you get phished that way, look for unknown numbers or unsolicited calls. Don't pick them up. I mean, click here for a free holiday or club membership or whatever. Don't click it. I mean, some of this comes down to common sense, but it's a very difficult thing to learn quickly. And, I think the ultimate thing is always be suspicious. Be suspicious of everything. Don't look carefully at what you're doing. Contact the senders direct if you believe it's an urgent matter. If you get something about a credit card, don't trust the email link or that. Call them. Go to a known email address, a known telephone number, or their known website that you've used in the past. What more can you say around that? I mean, passwords go without saying. Don't use things that are simple and easy guessable. Don't use your pet's name. Don't use questions that people can get the answers to by looking at your Facebook page, for example. And then it goes into the other things like, always back up your data. Use these services. And, the big one that I will say, it gets a bit, is patch. Keep up to date with your software patches. Make sure that you don't run old technology and old versions of software, and keep AV up to date as well. So, I mean, there's a lot one can do, but it gets quite technical. For the older generation, make use of your network. Use your more educated friends. Use your grandchildren to come and help you, because they are normally more aware of this stuff than you are. But there is no simple answer here, Ken. I mean, it's be aware, use common sense, and don't trust anyone.
Absolutely. No, great things to think about. Any different nuances within the context of spyware and folks perhaps compromising a system and logging the keystrokes of a user following what they're typing in?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things I'd say there, again, patching is critical there, but, there's some great technology that allows you to, within a browser, for example, browser extensions. You'll be very surprised. And it's funny, Paul Tyler and I did this experiment a few years ago. You hit a website like, nsre.com, for example. See the connections that reaches out to, from Google to everywhere else to Facebook. But you can use these technologies called uBlock. They're ad blockers. They actually restrict where that site can reach out to, and they offer a great protection and will stop your information going out to the wild. Again, we touched upon this earlier, Ken. Don't trust your public Wi-Fi's. Airports, Starbucks are the common ones, but again, if we said, use a VPN if possible, a little bit more complex. Use the grandchildren to set your VPN up if possible, but not always doable. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Paresh, let's kind of go back to the concept of Internet of Things. And if most seniors are focused on laptop, they're focused on desktop, and they're not appreciating all the other significant things around them, whether it's Ring, whether it's a thermostat and so forth, are there things that seniors can consider in protecting that additional threat vector that Eddie alluded to before, kind of leaping from one place to the other, or just general best practices that might help in protecting their personal information overall?
Yes, certainly. No, great question, Ken. I think, the internet connected devices pose a challenge that is very similar to the devices you use, like workstations or desktops. But it also has a lot of different additional nuances associated with that. What I mean by that is, you may not realize, but the Ring camera, for example, is not only just ringing your doorbell, it's taking pictures or storing that pictures or video streams, and it's sending them somewhere, right? And what happens in that Ring stream video could potentially, have data or information that you don't want to share with the outside world. So these devices have a very specific nuances to them in terms of protection, or being able to ensure you're not being compromised or sending out sensitive data or information. There are things they can do. So the first thing we typically do with a lot of our Google branded devices is ask our customers to essentially turn off the default passwords. So these devices ship with default passwords, whether it's a router or a Nest thermostat. And those passwords, one of the key setup steps is, change those passwords, number one, right? So just like you put a password on your Wi-Fi network, think of these different devices as also having passwords for services and accounts. So change those default passwords is one piece of advice. Another, and I think Paul had alluded to this, is apply security patches. And the nice, cool thing about a lot of these internet-connected devices is that they're able to download security patches over the air, and you can, in most cases, configure them to do it automatically. So the second piece of advice is, if your device supports auto updating over the air in terms of downloading and installing the latest security patches, go ahead and do that, because what it does is it essentially prevents, any vulnerabilities, or it minimizes the surface attack area by applying those security patches automatically, right? And then the third part is around making sure that your devices are making calls out to trusted and compliant sites. And this is more of a technology-related aspect, but when you buy specific cameras or specific devices from reputable vendors, they typically provide trust services. Hey, this device is going to be able to only talk to this particular URL or service in the cloud or on the internet. We talk to that service on the internet via a secure tunnel, and we use a digital certificate. So educating seniors that that trust icon, for example, in the browser, or that the fact that the Ring device is going to be is sold as coming with certificates and encryption built in by default, provides that trust in terms of using that device. But more importantly, those are the devices we want our seniors actually reaching out and buying, right? Is putting that onus back on the provider, the hardware provider in this case, in ensuring they build the security mechanisms into the device. And then the last one is just like Paul had alluded to as well. Be vigilant and make sure that you have auto patching turned on. You're using strong passwords. You're looking out for nefarious behavior. A simple typo in a URL could send your traffic to some part of the internet and leak your data without you actually knowing it. So make sure that these devices are secure from that perspective.
Awesome. Great tips. Eddie, let's conclude this section with you. You've worn a couple different hats, one focused on cybercrime cases, the other really more generally on insurance and loss control and mitigation. Anything that you have to add from a best practices perspective on effectively preventing losses for seniors and perhaps mitigating to the extent that they undergo some type of an event?
Sure. Two things about cybersecurity for seniors. But when you think about cybersecurity, it always starts with what they call a risk assessment. And it applies to companies as well as to individuals. You have to know what's most important and what you need to protect most carefully, right? And for individuals, that's almost always going to be your bank accounts, your retirement accounts, your assets. And how do you do that? So that what is the most important control that people need to be putting on these accounts is they need to have something called multi-factor authentication. Hopefully everybody on the call knows what that is, but I'll just say it again. Instead of just having a single password to access your bank account or your brokerage account, you should be having a text message sent to your phone that you have to type in, or some other way of also verifying that it's you. We think that, 95% of the financial fraud that goes on with respect to account breakouts could be prevented if people turned on multi-factor authentication. And I would say it's so important to have multi-factor authentication on your accounts that if your bank or your brokerage doesn't support multi-factor authentication in this day and age, you've got to change institutions. Have to change. And there are some banks that don't have it. But that's I think the number one way that individuals should be protecting themselves.
Fantastic. Okay, what I want to do is use the balance of our time to shift to a last substantive section and then kind of give an opportunity for the panelists to wrap up with some parting thoughts. Fourth section, we've talked so far about technology usage and kind of rationale. We talked a little bit about things associated with data breaches, and then flipped it to focus on loss prevention and mitigation. The piece that I want to make sure that we don't overlook is risk transfer and the ability to insure for losses. We're fortunate to have Tim and HSB came out with a nationwide leading solution for cyber coverage for personal lines. So Tim, maybe you can walk us through a little bit about what that solution entails to start. That would be a great kickoff.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I would note is that, as I mentioned before, it's relatively new. Cyber insurance for commercial enterprises, for businesses, have been around for 20 years or more. But cyber insurance available to individual people, individual consumers to protect their kind of cyber interests is relatively new. It emerged maybe 2017. And we've been doing it since the very beginning. We offer it through partner companies that we work with. And basically, the product that we offer is a kind of a collection of services and coverages designed to help consumers respond to various kinds of cyber attacks and cyber incidents that they may fall victim to. The coverage is part of it. The strictly insurance part is designed to reimburse policyholders for financial losses they may have suffered. If they have been the subject of a hacking event or a virus infection or something like that, and there's IT work that is necessary to get them back to where they were beforehand, we'll pay for those kinds of expenses. If they get involved in a ransomware kind of situation, we'll take care of the expenses involved with that. Same thing with fraud. But there's also a very important sort of service component to that, and part of this, frankly, is kind of emotional and psychological. These can be scary events, and we want to give them somebody to kind of hold their hand a little bit, provide them some emotional support, walk them through what's happened to them, and help them understand it, so that they can better understand and deal with the situation. But we also bring expertise. So I mentioned ransomware. If you're the victim of a ransomware attack, we're going to connect you with a professional consultant that can analyze your situation, talk about who the bad actors might be, what your options are, and walk through those kinds of things with you. We provide a helpline service. So if you have an IT problem of some sort, whether it's something that might lead to a claim or not, you have a number you can call and get some help with that. So we find that to be very helpful as well. So it's kind of we try to provide a holistic sort of package of financial reimbursement coverages as well as services to help consumers in this area.
Awesome. So you teased out the fact that the commercial market has been developed for 20 plus years, newer on the personal line side since 2017 specifically. Is there anything key from a loss control and or mitigation perspective that you think stands out that would fit well on the personal line side as opposed to the business side, or maybe it's a parallel?
Yeah, I mean, I think in broad strokes they're parallel, and I think I'll probably just put Paul did a great job, and some of the points he made were emphasized by Eddie and Paresh as well. So I'll just kind of further emphasize some of those things. I think if I had to just kind of dwell on one point, it would be the behavior part of it. I think particularly for people who aren't particularly tech savvy, some of the technical pieces of this may be a little bit difficult to understand and implement, but just that overall attitude of skepticism, I think is very important, particularly when you're dealing with websites, social media, and email in particular. Just think very carefully about things that you're seeing. There are probably whole categories of emails in particular that you should be very suspicious of. emails that are appear to come from banks, financial institutions, other things like that. Just be very skeptical about that. Anybody who's asking you for your credentials, verify your credentials, log into your account through email. Anybody who's asking you for money, particularly gift cards, be very, very suspicious of those things. I think it was Paul that mentioned, don't respond to an email. If you think it's real, go and contact that institution directly by going to their website or giving them a call rather than responding to the email itself or clicking on a link.
Awesome. So let's play off of where Tim just landed, just as a parting thought type of round. The goal is to focus on something that seniors might consider to stay ahead of the cybersecurity learning curve. What I just heard from Tim, and I'll circle back to him maybe on the end, was be skeptical and make sure that you are logging it appropriately, verifying, and so forth. So Eddie, let's come back to you. What would be a key takeaway that you would have for seniors to stay ahead of the learning curve?
I want to kind of answer that by following up on something that Tim was talking about, which is the personal cybersecurity insurance that's available out there. I think it's a great opportunity for the insurance industry that's a little bit different from the commercial side. Because if you think about, cyber insurance for a company, the company has their own technology team. They've got their chief information security officer in place, and it's hard to give a company advice about how they should be securing their systems. But for individual cybersecurity, having an insurance company partner that can provide their policyholders with best guidance, a website on, what things to watch out for, what are good email providers, for example, how to keep your systems up to date. I think it's a real opportunity for the insurance industry to help individuals have best practices when it comes to cybersecurity.
Absolutely. So listen to the guidance of the experts. Take an HSB. They've got a solution. They're looking to offer not just insurance, but preventative mitigation tips. Do it in a straightforward way, but absorb that right as a customer and take advantage of that for sure. Paul, did you want to follow that up? I think you're on mute. Go ahead.
I mean, I think from my point of view, I'd like to pick up on something Tim said. When you're doing online transactions, there is use a credit card, not a debit card. It's a lot easier to get the money back from a credit card company with this any fraudulent activity than it is your own personal bank and your bank account. So that's just one thing I just wanted to add in. But in terms of I think we've said it all. So be vigilant around what you're doing online, but also, I forgot to mention this a bit earlier, is, we've been chatting about it, the use of passwords and multi-factor authentication. Everyone thinks they're safe. These one-time codes or one-time passwords sent by SMS are known to be hackable and fairly easily hackable. The biometrics is a step forward, but as Laura said, my twin can open my phone. I mean, there's ways around everything, but it goes back to, I think, Eddie, you were saying it's the degree of risk that you can accept. The more you're closing that, the better it is. No, there is no secure, perfect world here, and education is the key thing I think that we're missing as a community for the seniors. I think there needs to be more done in that space. If you're aware of the issues and you can have advice from those, I think that's what we need to do as a community.
Yeah, I guess the parallel to the commercial side, it's not a matter of if but when applies from a personal lines perspective as well, and even more important. So the educational piece that you just hit is very important for sure. Paresh?
Yep. Yeah, I think one of the most important things for seniors is to understand this concept of limiting the blast radius or divulging information in layers. So what we, in the security arena as it relates to technology, we build our platforms to have different layers of security. And in order for you to breach something or get at some golden nugget, you've got to pass all those security checks. So the advice here is that outside of the actual technology and the security, just be vigilant of what data you store in which services and try to minimize that. The example would be, if you use a bill pay service online to pay for utilities and insurance premiums and stuff like that, that's a lot safer than actually uploading your checking bank account number onto every different service. What you're doing there is you're limiting the blast radius. instead of your personal data being in 10 different places where one of those 10 could be breached, you're putting your personal data in 1 or 2 places, which gives you better odds from a risk perspective. I hope that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Kind of goes back to clarity on how you're communicating it, to Paul's earlier point about education line of sight. Tim, do you want to finish it up with anything beyond skepticism and login verification and so forth?
Sure. Just the last thing I would say, the kind of things that I've been talking about and Paresh and Paul and Eddie have been talking about, it comes down to a fairly short list of best practices. And there are some great online resources where you can find those lists. Just preparing for this panel, the one thing that I came across was the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security, CISA, has a great list of 8 to 10 best practices for seniors to keep themselves safe online.
Fantastic. Sounds like a great tool to perhaps consider as a part of the wrap up with the podcast. Maybe we could share that site as well as a link. With that, thank you so much for the panelists for taking the time today. Before we open it up to Q&A, I believe I'm transitioning off to Ramsey.
All right, I believe I'm unmuted now.
You
I
are.
get a thumbs up? All right, excellent. Anyway, Ken, thank you so much for leading a great discussion. Thank you to all the panelists. This is a very important and very tricky issue, and it was great to hear a lot of the discussion around how seniors are adopting technology more. It's a theme we've been hearing in every single one of the sessions we had. One of the most striking stats that we heard in the session we had yesterday was from a platform that has 40,000 consumers. Their average age of 85, and 85% of those consumers use their technology at least once a day. And since COVID happened, the frequency of use has gone up by 500%. So, with all those increasing touch points, all these risks we've talked about are going to become increasingly important. So over the course of the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to be joined by Paul and Laura. We're all going to be, asking some of these questions. I wanted to start off with a question for Edward, and it is this: does the legal system have the capacity to keep up with all the cybercrime that's going on? I mean, it is a legal system that's large, but as I said in our breakout session, it's an entire world of hackers that we're all trying to play defense against. I guess, what are our reasonable expectations from the legal system to be able to help us, once bad things do happen to people or companies?
I think at this point it's probably good for me to say that, anything that I've said during this meeting should be taken as my own personal views and not the views of the United States Department of Justice. When it comes down to that answer, I will just say it's very challenging. And it's challenging not necessarily because of the technology, and the technology obviously is always moving, it's always changing, but it's challenging because a lot of the criminals are overseas. And so the traditional kind of law enforcement investigations that we would be able to do if somebody's in the United States really are much harder to do when they're overseas and we have to coordinate with foreign law enforcement. And then if we manage to identify the person through some miraculous, stroke of good fortune, it becomes even harder to try to extradite them and prosecute them. But that being said, there's a lot of really energetic people working in the law enforcement side, at the FBI, at a lot of different federal agencies, at the U.S. Department of Justice, and we do have great successes at times, but not as much as I wish we could have if we had a better ability to go after people overseas.
Okay.
Can I jump in? Craig Sims, I thought, left a really good question, and I'll answer this and ask this in 2 parts. I guess, Eddie, from your perspective, it's interesting. Big, broad question. I'll take it away. You probably would never think you would hear from an insurance company. Is how do you? A lot of times, we're actually trying to engage seniors to give us some very personal information about their financial status, their plans, their bank accounts, their wills or trusts. It's a lot of very, very sensitive type of information. From a marketing perspective, we say, well, how do we actually get them to trust us? And is there anything we can learn? We haven't mentioned catfishing. We sort of alluded to it here. are there positive things we could learn from what cash phishing have learned working with seniors in ways that actually would help them with their financials, and start a conversation about things that they would normally not share?
I think we have that same problem as well. Actually, when we reach out to individuals who are victims of some crime, and we'll say, hey, we're the FBI, we've got some information for you, can you help us out? And a lot of the responses are, yeah, sure, you're the FBI. And I think the only way to get around that is, in your communications with them, it's important to provide them some way to verify, who you are, whether that's, go to your corporate website and, there's a clear link or a path or some way that they can verify that this is a legitimate inquiry for information. But otherwise, it's very challenging. And I really honestly do think that personal cyber insurance has an opportunity to develop that bond between the customer and the insurance company in a way that's not really there in the commercial side. And I actually was working on the commercial side of cyber insurance before coming back to the US DOJ, and so that's why I say that. But individuals don't have that built-in expertise that would cause them to look elsewhere.
Okay, that's great. The flip side, and Craig sort of asked this, which is how do we design websites, to get people to trust us? And I would say broadly, communications. We do digital marketing. Anthony is sort of our, we call him air traffic control for all email communications. Ashley does our social media. We're pretty good as a group at, hey, email comes in, to Paul's point, at a commercial level. The language on this email from this company doesn't sound right. There's misspelling. There's a logo kind of off. We're all pretty good, Tom Buckingham, except for one of our people in our team, but well, we won't name him. Is there, if you're giving a recommendation for companies so they aren't easy prey for companies, is there a general set of guidance? Is there technology out there, and I'll throw this out to the group, that we should all be thinking about so that our emails or websites aren't really easily spoofed? Because these people are getting a lot better at crafting these emails so they look like they come from real companies.
That's a good question. I mean, if you've been involved in the cybersecurity industry for a while, you know that digital signatures have been around for 15, 20 years, but nobody uses them. And I'm not sure why that is. I don't have an answer for you.
Paresh, you from Google? I mean, what's out there? Are there startup technologies that we shall be looking at?
Yeah, so there's, I think Eddie brought up digital signatures, public key infrastructure. It's been around a while, not a lot of adoption. At Google, we see a lot of, within our own systems and platforms. If you've ever used the Google Chrome browser or our Gmail service, you would notice that as a vendor, we provide things like that little lock icon to make sure that, hey, this site the domain has been verified by us, the service provider, and that the domain has a valid certificate, right? We also embed within the Gmail service things like automatically detecting spam and automatically detecting risky emails. And that, as a consumer, you don't see the amount of work and effort that goes into that in terms of the machine learning behind the scenes. Not only is the system actually detecting spam email, it's also detecting, malware, bots, threats, spyware, right? And so there's a lot we do as a vendor in that space. But there's also a lot of newfangled technologies coming down the pike. And again, just the disclaimer, this is my personal opinion, not Google's. I see blockchain as an opportunity for being able to that distributed ledger technology. Not only is it great for non-repudiation for financial transactions, but it also could be as a way to actually implement end-to-end security in terms of making sure that every transaction flow, every website, every URL that gets clicked, or every packet that flows in the network is digitally signed. It's signed by some party or authority, and that we all have consensus and can agree that that's the case, right? But are we there today? Maybe not. But those are the types of things we're starting to see hit the field, not the field, but the general market more and more.
Paresh, with regard to that comment, though, what do you see the threat of? I mean, I'm getting a bit geeky. Quantum computing, when the power of quantum hits, let's say, the commercial world. I mean, security as we know it is under threat. I'm not saying it's broken, but some of these algorithms, the weaker algorithms, can be broken very quickly.
Correct.
I mean,
Correct.
what's your view on that as well?
Yeah, so with quantum computing, if you think back to high performance compute a few years ago, a decade or two ago, very little people had access to a lot of horsepower in terms of raw compute. That changed over time. Fast forward to today, or even 5 years ago, you could set up. You hear of crypto mining farms, and you can do it, fairly cheaply, right? What it gives you is access to a lot of raw compute. And that raw compute can now start implementing things like rainbow tables for password cracking, where 20 years ago, a rainbow table to solve, let's say, a older algorithm like AES 128 would have taken physically 50 man-years to complete. On today's infrastructure or computing power, you could do the same thing in 2 years or 15 months, right? As we go past that into quantum computing in the future, all what's going to happen is that access to that raw compute is going to become cheaper. It's going to become quicker, where password cracking, crypto mining, aggregating a lot of data from a lot of different places to build a profile of risk of risky information for me, the person Paresh, is going to become easier, right? Purely because that raw compute is just available. It's available cheaply and it's super quick, right? So yeah, it's going to result in, I think, the security. The folks that defend against that, you think about vendors that provide products and services, or white hat security and ethical hackers. Those folks are going to have to, build tools and technologies and techniques to protect against that, right? And it's going to be reactive, right, until that first event occurs where somebody used a quantum computer to crack, a database of passwords that was considered uncrackable over a 50-year period, right?
I hope it doesn't get in the hands of a rogue nation to start, right? Because that will change, isn't it? I mean, that's a major threat at that point.
So, Paresh, you threw out a term, rainbow table. Is there a short, non-technical description of what that is for those of us who are non-technical?
Yeah. Rainbow tables are, a simple way to describe it is if I want to log into a service, I could go on the dark web and buy a list of passwords that has every possible permutation of every possible type of different variation of common passwords that you would use, and you then use a large cluster of distributed computers to essentially keep hitting that service and trying every possible permutation until you're able to get in with a successful hit, right? That's what it is. Yeah. Got it.
All right. So, I mean, I guess there's sort of a big picture question here, which is, as I think about like big hacks that have happened and announcements that are happening, you have often heard companies say, well, it'll never happen again, or this could never happen. And I think, my sense is that companies get themselves into trouble there, because it seems like that's an impossible thing to actually sort of warranty. But I think that we as a society, as shareholders, stakeholders, we sort of demand that, right? So I wonder, and this is sort of a general question for any of you. So let one of you sort of decide who wants to answer it. But like, do we have to get to a place where we sort of all accept that everybody's going to get hacked at some point, and really this is a question of damage control? Really good damage control, as much prevention as possible, with the expectation that there will be some damage, but how you handle sort of the aftermath will be how you differentiate yourself. Who has some thoughts on that? Ed, do you have thoughts on that, or Paul?
Ellen's raising her hand.
Oh, Ellen.
If that's okay,
I didn't see you. Let's hear you.
That's okay. I'm not an expert like Ed is, but I guess interestingly, Paul probably pointed to me because knows that I had been royally hacked, such that the government did have to get involved, just personally, several years ago. And in turn, it's really led to my deep inquiry into security and cybersecurity and other things like that. I will say that in places like the Aspen Security Forum, where they talk about the biggest threats around the world, cybersecurity is always number one or number two. So I personally believe that brilliant people like some of these panelists and their colleagues spend an amazing amount of thought trying to lock us down, and brilliant cyber criminals spend just as much time. So I do think that the other side, in learning how to constantly educate yourself as a consumer and as a company, is important. But to your point, Ramsey, I think it is utterly important for there to be more available, greater accessible services for those who get hacked. Because once you are locking it back down is still something that someone like me, who worked in government and has a lot of contacts, probably spent 2 months full time doing after being attacked. So I do think, to your point, it's really important for there to be good services to help people lock back down.
Yeah, and Ellen, I'm gonna here's kind of softball. Maybe tell people. So we had some great questions, coming up in dialogue in the chat here, and so there's a debate going on, like how much of this is education, and just to kind of go back to a couple of the discussions we had before. We've seen all kinds of seniors pop up their webcams, do Zoom calls in their 80s, and it's interesting. Like the churches are the ones who've, like, in some of these areas, it feels like have trained people to use their cameras because all the church services went. Ellen, what's the role for education here?
Well, as those who were in our side group, thank you for asking me that. For those who were in our side group, learned about my background here. My last name is Sabin, by the way. I think I'm the only one that doesn't have a last name there, because I'm so secure. My career now is on writing books that educate children and families on social cause topics, and my latest book is okay, little plug, happens to be right there, a cybersecurity book for kids. And I think that teaching cybersecurity to kids is absolutely vital, getting them in the clean habits of everything everybody discussed. But I also think it's a great, I hate that this is being taped to use this word as a children's book author, but manipulative way to bring conversations into households, because kids often are the Trojan horses that change adult behavior. So getting smart habits into homes, often through kids' conversations, I think is incredibly important. And, to a conversation Paul and I had before, a lot of the things that children are learning are the same things, not just seniors, but employees and others really need to learn to be clean. So I think that, Ramsey started this session by saying how important is education. We're always going to be running this race. So we're always going to need to be educating ourselves, our employees, and our kids.
All right.
A bit of a different perspective. To go back to Ramsey's question and the question about education. And it's a more long-term perspective. I mean, right now, absolutely. I think education is critically important. But if you think about where you bring in artificial intelligence, right, which is everywhere around us now, it's a race between who can use artificial intelligence better for defense versus who can use it better for offense, defense, whatever.
Yep.
And now this might be a little bit idealistic of me and maybe a little bit too optimistic, but somewhere down the road, people are not going to be manually protecting their systems. They're not going to be manually creating malware. It's all going to be done in an automated fashion. And who's going to have the best access to automated tools? I'm hoping it's the good guys, right? Right now, the criminals are kind of on even footing. Or even in better footing than law enforcement. But in the future, hopefully, the Googles and Amazons and everybody else who's providing AI platforms will be providing them to the good guys and not the bad guys. And that's the kind of only reason I would say hopefully sometime in the future, we'll win this. I can't tell you when, but that's my take on that.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for your questions and for the extended conversation. I'll finish up by saying I think that like technology will have to be the solution because there's too many nodes that we all have to manage to really, and too many people that have to do it for us to do anything other than a bit of sort of near-term damage control. So Paul, bring us home. You're on mute. This one, Paul Tyler.
This is one of those words you want to. I was listening to a radio station today when I had to drive to the UPS store to drive, which was a mistake. And somebody what was Elvis Durancher, and they're talking about the words to throw out like for 2020. We're almost to the end, right? Things like "you're on mute," right? That was one of the words. Get rid of it. Hey, listen. First of all, thanks all of you. Thanks for your time. I know storms coming in. Everybody's running in. Thanks for the cover. This is a little different topic. We've kind of covered the waterfront on, security is security. Tom Buckingham, as you said, I don't know. Do you feel safer after listening to this?
I don't, but I feel better educated. I feel more aware. I mean, I thought it was very helpful. I think when you understand all the things that can go on and how some of the things that even we take comfort in maybe aren't as secure as we think. On the flip side, we all go. We all use bank accounts and give our money to them. They don't even hold it all, and we trust that they're going to give it back to us when we need it.
Yeah. So security is one of those words that has a lot of different meanings in our business. Cheryl Connor, security, right? Retirement's okay. What does that mean exactly, right? And I think the definition is changing a lot quickly. And so we'll be. This was a great discussion. And I think if we can't understand it, how are our parents, going to deal with this, or how are we, to Ellen's perspective, because maybe it's not us. We spend 2 months dealing with it. It's our parents who picked up the wrong phone or did something. What kind of damage could that do to their security? So I think a lot more to come on this. And I want to thank you. And Laura, do you want to just sort of talk about what's coming next, from this discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. So from the discussions from Forum 1 all the way into today, we're looking at, the entire piece, the entire horizon. So we're collectively putting together discussion papers for each one of the forums. So you'll see podcasts, both audio and video, plus the discussion papers as a way to continue the conversation. So as we look forward into 2021 and beyond, what does the hand and keystroke look like between humanity and technology, and how can we use that and better educate ourselves to go forward, specifically as we look at retirement planning. So as we're doing everything from reimagining products to defining the word senior to figuring out who's on offense and who's on defense, I think it's going to be an evolving conversation. So we ask that you be on the lookout for the podcast, for the social media that we plan to put out, as well as those discussion papers to use as a jumping off point into 2021 and beyond. And we'll be in touch with additional opportunities to engage with us and engage with all of the people that we're building within this community. So I just wanted special thanks again, Ramsey. You've been with us for the entire journey here. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. Obviously, Paul on our team, Tom for the support, Anthony, Ashley. Clearly, this would not be possible without you. So keep your eyes out, and on behalf of Nassau Reimagine, have a healthy and safe holiday season. And thank you, Ken, for moderating today's discussion.
We want to especially thank today's sponsors, Launch and Symetra.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend us on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information about this company and other great startups at imagine.nsre.com.